On va y aller. Alors, bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Standing Committee for Agriculture. We're pursuing a study on mental health challenges that Canadian farmers, ranchers, and producers face. With us this morning, we welcome Mr. René Beauregard, who is Director General of Au Cœur des Familles Agricoles. Welcome, Mr. Beauregard. Good morning. As well as Nancy Langevin, who is field worker for this same group. Welcome to you. And also by telephone, we don't have video conferencing because we can't have both here. We're being televised this morning, so we can't use both media at one and the same time. So by phone, we'll be hearing Pierrette Desrosiers, who is occupational psychologist. Do you hear me well, Madame Desrosiers? Is the sound coming through to you? Madame Desrosiers, are you on the line? So we'll begin with our guests here in the room. So you have 6 minutes to make your opening statement. Thank you. Thank you very much for welcoming us this morning. I believe that at the outset, I would like to tell you a little bit about the birth of our organization and our raison d'être. Au Cœur des Familles Agricoles is an organization that has been in existence since 2003. Our purpose is to intervene in the farming community. People in the community back in the early 2000s saw that there was a lot of distress amongst farmers, and they noticed that these same farmers weren't seeking out help within the healthcare system. And when they did call out for help within the system, unfortunately, they found that the network didn't necessarily respond to their reality. What sets us apart, Au Cœur des Familles Agricoles? Well, it is that we based our action on street workers, but we adapted it to farming reality, farming life. So we intervene proactively and preventively. We don't wait for producers, farmers to call out for help, to ask us for help. We go to them, we visit farms, we visit people on their farms, and that's what distinguishes us from healthcare services offered throughout the province of Quebec. We also do milk runs. Our milk runs are based on the same principle as the milk trucks that go to farms, going door to door, farm to collect the milk. So our on-the-ground workers move about in the countryside, meet with farmers to sound them out and see how they feel with regard to their mental health. And they also want to raise awareness about our organization and the services we offer. So we offer psychosocial accompaniment and support. We do this in the context of our abilities. If the needs of the producer are greater, are beyond what we are able to offer, we refer these people to the healthcare network. We don't abandon them. We help them access the assistance that they need because we're aware of the fact that alone, left to their own devices, they probably wouldn't go that far seeking out these other services. So our workers have social work BAs, or they've worked, or rather they've studied at the college level, so they're qualified to intervene with our farmer customer base. But another prerequisite that's very important to us, it is really essential when we choose who we hire, it's their knowledge of the farming milieu. So the interveners, I use that term because these are just interveners working for our organization. These interveners have knowledge such that they can establish relationships very quickly with farmers. So there's that trust relationship that is quickly established because the farmer is aware of the fact that the person who is there with him or her is familiar with his or her reality. Our services are offered 24/7. We also offer respite service. We have a respite house. We offer this house up to people who have urgent needs. People can come and meet with someone daily. There's interaction. They can stay for up to a week and they can return if need be. In 2007, we had 1,157 interventions. These are farmers who came to meet with us because they didn't find their place within the network. But based on our expertise and our knowledge of the agricultural world, they came to us to seek out these services. 62% of those who asked for help were men. So our premise is that men are hard to tackle as a clientele with regard to mental health, but they account for 62% of the individuals who come to us for help. These are men, 62%. So it proves that our approach vis-à-vis men is a positive one. We cover all categories of production in farming. And an announcement was made yesterday. Over the last 2 years, the producers who sought the most help were dairy producers. 72% of our requests for assistance came from dairy farmers. We are present in 11 administrative regions. We serve Quebec, so we've intervened in 11 regions, and we're present in 7 regions. And in conclusion, perhaps I would say that we get 25% of our funding from grants. The rest of our funding comes from donations, sponsorships, etc., that we seek out with farming companies that work alongside farmers. So that's the picture I would draw out for you with regard to our organization, Au Cœur des Familles Agricoles. Thank you, Mr. Beauregard. Ms. Desrosiers, can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you well, but the interpreter can't hear very well. And this might be tricky. I'll do my best. But if the sound isn't sufficient because I'm speaking at the same time, I'll underscore the problem. So everyone is online. Ms. Langevin, you have 6 minutes. So I'm a social worker. I've worked since 2016 for the Chaudière-Appalaches region. A colleague contacted me from a CLSC with regard to a patient who was being accompanied for quite some time. This woman was experiencing various difficulties. Given my expertise in farming, people called out to me for me to provide support and accompany this woman. The purpose of the meetings were to help her buy her share of the farm from her parents. Over the last few weeks, I received a letter from this woman, and she writes, "It's all over, Nancy. I'm abandoning my life. Nothing is holding me back. I'm constantly being abandoned by those I love. My plan is taking shape. I will be alone this weekend. No Charlie, no one with me, no one by my side. It will be the ideal time to leave and fall asleep without ever waking up again. I don't want to know what to do. It's all the fault of my parents. It's because of them that I'm so depressed. Stéphane is going hunting all of next week. He has a lot more on his mind than just me. I was just thrown out to the wolves. Stéphanie is too busy to realize that I'm not feeling well, doing well. It's the best time for me to take action. Every time I start moving forward, something happens. But now I've come to the end of my rope. I'm at the bottom of the barrel, and I have no one to help me. I no longer have the strength to fight. You, at least, you had your family to help you, to support you, to love you. I'm a bad mother who's having trouble taking care of her daughter. I'm always there for everyone else, and as always, no one takes the time to listen to my messages of distress, my calls out for help. As soon as the week is over, there'll no longer be any Cindy. Everyone will have been rid of me. I received that email at 7:45. Let me tell you that I was very upset by this. I quickly picked up my phone and I called the producer, the farmer, directly to say I was there for her. I was there, I was present, and I was really worried having received that letter. Why did she choose to call out to me? There's a psychologist who's been following her for more than a year. I've only been on the scene for a few weeks. But as I said earlier, it's because of my expertise in farming. I introduced myself as saying I was a former dairy producer. So the fact that I'm a former dairy producer creates a solid link with this person who reached out to me. What did I do? I called her. After 15 minutes, I realized that her daughter was in the background. I asked her, is your daughter going to daycare today? She said yes. And I said, why don't you drop her off at daycare and then we'll chat together? And she said, yes, that's a great idea. During that time, I quickly contacted the psychologist because we had already been in touch, because she had authorized us over the last few weeks to communicate together, to work together, to help her. The psychologist was surprised. He said, I saw her last week and she was doing well. I was even surprised to see that she was doing so well. So I said, what do we do now? So my role was to deal with the agricultural side of things, and the psychologist took care of ensuring that she had housing over the weekend, someone to call her, someone on the distress line to check up on her, to make sure that she was following through going to the crisis center. Our purpose was to reduce the stressors that she was experiencing. At my end, I called her employer, who was a dairy producer, to advise him that her mental health had really deteriorated over the last few days. I also called her parents to inform them about the mental health of their daughter, because logically the parents are supposed to be aware, but in that situation they weren't. For several weeks, I didn't mention that, but she was having financial difficulties. There was also a separation that she had experienced, and she had mental health problems added on to a family conflict, because of the taking over of her parents' farm. So the only good news I saw in this letter is that we were Tuesday morning, and her plan, she wanted to realize it on Friday, so that gave us enough time to put a safety net in place in order for her to be properly accompanied. So my work really ties in with farming. I didn't overstep. The psychologist called the patient in the end of the morning. I called at 10. He called at 11:30. He set up an appointment with her the next day, and we continued to be in contact via email. So that's one of the interventions I've done, one among many. We could talk about our milk runs, what this means. We don't wait for people to call out for help. I just appear on the doorstep, on the farm, saying who I am, what our organization's mission is, and then I ask them questions. Sometimes I don't stay just 5 minutes. I might stay 15, 20 minutes, sometimes the whole morning, if I arrived at the right time when someone really needed to talk. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Langevin. You will have the opportunity to answer questions. Ms. Desrosiers, are you still on the line? Yes? So go ahead. You have 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm the spouse of an agricultural producer, and I'm also a psychologist. I've worked for several years in the farming community as a psychologist. 2 points today. On top of all of the stressors that we're familiar with, there is a new one, and there are imminent needs for training for interveners. On top of all the stressors you're probably familiar with in farming, I want to draw to your attention an emerging threat that of the animal rights activist Mr. Gagnon from the criminology faculty at the University of Montreal is saying that it's a terrorist threat that is growing, and some militants are saying that it's the next big revolution. Who are these activists? I'm going to explain this to you because it's very important to understand. There are vegans. Not all vegans are activists, of course. They deem that animals are equal to humans. They want the complete abolition of any use of animals in any form, be it in farming, the consumption of animal products, pets. They want to close down slaughterhouses. This is on the rise, and we must confront this challenge because there are more and more vegans amongst millennials. Obviously, I'm repeating this, but most vegans are not violent or militant, but this is the new social context. A viral video, a video that goes viral, can cause an awful lot of damage. There's also a great concern with the environment, clearly, but we're seeing the number of farms reducing, and fewer people are aware of the realities of farming. Who is being impacted upon by these animalists? Well, the first victims are producers. We say that they're polluters, that they're aggressors, that they're rapists because of their farming. These are harsh terms when you get up in the morning and you see this and these messages. It just adds to your stress and to your distress. And psychological distress is very high for Canadian farmers. Several researchers have shown this. So who is impacted upon by animalists? Producers, inseminators, those who transport animals, veterinarians, those who work in slaughterhouses, butchers, all of the people in the farming stream.
Oui.
It's on the ear set?
Oui. Est-ce que je peux continuer? Oui. Est-ce que je peux continuer?
C'est correct?
Est-ce qu'on m'entendait?
Can you hear me? May I continue? Go ahead, Madame Desrosiers.
Eh bien, il y a de plus en plus de violence psychologique, de harcèlement, de cyber-intimidation.
So we're talking about harassment, cyber intimidation for our producers, including distress, psychological distress. Several experts are saying that it's an immense source of stress, and it's an emerging threat. So I wanted to call this to your attention, this new threat that is just going to add to the pile. Second point, we need more and more interveners. Mr. Beauregard and Madame Langevin earlier stated that there are specific risks for farmers. We have to intervene with men. It's a different approach, but also family businesses within the system, and we don't have enough interveners who are trained, psychologists as well. We need interveners who fully understand the farming reality. So we have to train more and more psychologists in private clinics, but also within the healthcare system. We need more workers on the ground. We have to help them, support them, continue to train them, and we have to train entrepreneurs as well. We have to work upstream and help them develop more competencies, teach them entrepreneurship, help them manage their stress. There has to be a better work family life balance. We have to help them in their leadership roles in order to help them face their challenges, the challenges of today and tomorrow. We're saying that agriculture is becoming more and more complex daily, and to be able to navigate through the challenges, we need an awful lot of knowledge and a spirit of entrepreneurship. So we have to help them upstream to avoid them experiencing distress so that they're better able to face these challenges. There's an awful lot of distress in the farming community, and it has a direct impact on entrepreneurs, on their families, and farming businesses. So my conclusion, it's a single message. We have to invest in our producers, with producers, because healthy producers will create healthier farming businesses and a healthier society. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Desrosiers. We will now begin our round of questions. And if you have questions for Ms. Desrosiers, please indicate that to me.
Thank you for being here in replacement. First will be Mr. Dreeshen for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I will try to split my time. Mr. Motz, I know, does have a question. First of all, though, I would like to speak with Pierrette de Rocher. The things that you have said is exactly what the key issues are in agriculture. I have said for years that the issues that we have with, I believe you had indicated, animal rights activists, they plus other groups and organizations that look at, I'm a grain farmer, so they look at other non-tariff trade barriers and issues, GMOs, neonicotinoids, trace elements, all of these sorts of things are done to protect other people's investments, and this, I think, is one of the things when farmers look at it, they understand what is happening, and there is a discord between agriculture and those that live in urban centers. The other aspect, and I believe this discussion, this point for other guests as well, when we look at the fact that the farm is your workplace and the workplace is your farm, that the massive investments that you have are always in jeopardy, and then we have all of these different groups that just don't care. I mean, I look at the A&W ad, which talks about no added hormones when you go from 5 nanograms of estrogen to 7 if it is used, and that you would have thousands of nanograms in the bun that you have. I mean, these things are frustrating, and they are simply done for market share. I wonder if you could comment on that, and then I will give the rest of my time to Mr. Motz. Thank you.
OK. Donc, ça s'adresse.
The question is for me? Is it for me, the question, asks Madame Desrosiers? Yes, go ahead, Ms. Desrosiers. I was listening to the interpretation. So you were talking about animal activists, the animal defense rights activists. I think we have to start in schools, at the grassroots, to explain what a farming business is, to explain what farmers' work is, to help people appreciate our work, because fewer and fewer people understand all of the complexities. So our work isn't being appreciated as it should, and I think we have to be a counterweight to the misinformation. We have to inform the greater public through more education. Education at all levels within the school system. We have to teach children that farmers are respectful of the environment, and children that they're doing excellent work. And we will have to place the importance of their role, the role of farms, at the heart of the discussion. So inform, educate, raise awareness, because unfortunately there are people who are relaying viral messages that are very destructive for farmers. And it's very difficult for them to see what is happening. There are fewer farmers, and we will no longer have any choice. My dream is that all children have the opportunity at least once in their childhood to go to a farm, because a lot of adults have never seen a farm, never. Apparently 7% of Americans believe that milk comes from brown cows. We're going to move to another question. We're running out of time. Mr. Motz.
Chair, and thank you for the panel for being here. My riding is made up of mostly rural agricultural area, 30,000 square kilometers, and my heritage also is in agriculture and still farm and ranch. So I have a deep appreciation for the impact and the importance of farming in our economy, but also for Canadians and the production of good food. Now I know from people in my riding that stress and anxiety went up when last summer they heard from the current government, and they were labeled as tax cheats, and the government was looking at ways to get more from them, taking money out of their pockets, making it more difficult for them to pass their farms on to their next generation. So I guess in my area, the language that was used, accusing people of that, caused anger and frustration. And it really showed a disconnect between our agriculture community and the current government. So does that kind of language create problems for those who are struggling already? Would be one question. And the other one, did you observe any impacts on the farming community that you people interact with on those policies that were brought out or the messaging that was used that would impact them even more? Or do they just internalize the attacks that they've received?
Ce qu'il faut dire, c'est que ce qu'on se rend compte, nous,
What we've realized is this. With regard to the request for assistance on the part of farmers, there are often several factors at play. It's not just one factor, it's an accumulation of several, such that at some point in time, there's a trigger. And the trigger, over the last 2 years, as I was saying earlier, well, the great majority of our interventions pertain to the dairy sector, dairy farmers. Over the last 2 years, it's mostly been dairy farmers, I'm talking here about Quebec, who've called upon us, compared with 10 years ago when it was in the hog sector that there were more difficulties over the last few years. This has tied in directly with the insecurity because of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, etc. We're running out of time, Mr. Breton, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our panelists for being here today. I would like to salute the members of Au Cœur des Familles Agricoles in Saint-Hyacinthe, who are right next to my riding, and Mr. Beauregard, who stayed very humble in his presentation. But on top of being Director General, he is the mayor of the municipality of St. Shefford, and he's a former farmer, so he is very familiar with this work, with this field of activity. So I wish at the outset to congratulate you for your excellent work, Ms. Langevin. Mr. Beauregard, you're a model of a Quebec organization, and we would like to see many more similar organizations created, accompanying farmers, helping them out in our region. So we're really spoiled in our region to have you. Thank you very much. We know that in the U.S., several studies have been carried out. Based on these studies, farmers are more vulnerable. They suffer more from mental health issues. Apparently, the incidence is double that of the general population in the case of farmers. Could you both talk to us a little bit about the problems of anxiety and stress? What are the 3 or 4 major stressors in your work? As Mr. Beauregard was saying, it's often an accumulation. As we mentioned, it's mostly dairy farmers, and dairy farmers experience separations, deaths, accidents. I don't know if you saw last week, 2 people died in a silo. Those are some of their stressors. But add on top of that the supply management issue, that's an additional weight, an additional stressor. They're constantly being called upon to be more and more effective and profitable with their businesses, and producers are running out of steam. And people are telling them you have to get bigger and bigger to be more and more effective, efficient, competitive. That's the message that they're getting. But they're not always ready to sacrifice the family business. we've seen this over the last few years, this trend. We know that a farmer's job is solitary, more solitary than most professions. Mental health problems, when you note that there are some at play, you refer farmers to psychologists and to other services. Your respite solution you mentioned is interesting. When a doctor must remove an individual from his or her workplace, well, it's not easy in the case of a farmer because the farmer's workplace is oftentimes the same place as his house. So it's not easy to tell the farmer, well, stay at home and don't work when he's just a few steps away from the barn. He hears the work, he hears all of the activity going on around him. So am I right in understanding that those people can go to you for respite? Yes, this respite house is available to producers throughout the province who have a need. As you explain, a need to get away from the farm. The problem is due to the fact that it's difficult to leave their business, their farm, to come to us. It's free of charge, their respite. The accompaniment, the housing, it's a daily presence. Someone is there, an intervener like Nancy, and in practice, if this person leaves his or her farm to come to rest and to try to take charge of his or her mental health, well, someone has to take care of his or her work on the farm during this absence. So to leave your farm, to hand your business over to someone who isn't familiar with the business, will perhaps create more problems, more stress than to remain there. So we have to try to find a balance. At present, the people who are seeking respite, well, often these are people who are sharing their business with someone else. There are several owners, several shareholders, and they can rely on their other shareholders. Often it's a family farm, it's the a husband and wife team, and if they have greater needs, well, they can't leave for a lengthy period of time. Do I have any time left, Mr. Chairman? A minute? I will continue with you. Because from what I understand, it's mostly women interveners on the ground. That's an interesting model. How many do you have within your organization? At present, we have 5, one in the Montérégie, center of Quebec, Chaudière-Appalaches, who will start next week in the Estrie region, in the Mauricie region. But there are 2 other organizations with which we have partnerships in the Laurentians and in the Lower St. Lawrence. And eventually Témiscamingue. There are 2 other regions that have approached us to see if we might offer our services in those regions. We've realized that the closer we are to producers, the more producers will call out to us. Before we were limited to the Montérégie, but we wanted to branch out throughout the province, but our ability to intervene and interact has grown such that the needs, when they're there, we're close to them. We can intervene within a week, 2 weeks max, which is much better than what we've seen in the healthcare system. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Breton, Mr. Beauregard, Mr. McGregor.
Ms. Langevin and Monsieur Beauregard, you both mentioned dairy farmers, and I think in your opening statement you said 72% of the requests came from dairy farmers. Does that correspond with the percentage? Like, is that in line with the percentage they represent in your region, or is it higher?
Donc, seulement en lien avec...
So if we tie this in with the number of producers, in fact, what you want to know is if it's in proportion with the number of dairy farmers we have in the province. Well, not necessarily. The 72%, well, it's 72% of the 1,157 interventions we've done. But it's not necessarily 72% of dairy farmers in Quebec. That's the nuance that I would add here. It's based on the interventions we've carried out. What this means is that the help we provide, that we've provided over the last 2 years, the numbers I gave you, well, those were the numbers for 2017, so the 1,157. But this year, as of August, we had already done close to 1,000 interventions, and we still have 4 months to go in a year. So the individuals who are seeking our help are mostly dairy farmers. As I explained earlier, That wasn't the reality in the past, and we've done a lot of interviews in the past with the hog and beef producers. But the requests for assistance, I'm just putting a number out there, but if there are 5,000 dairy producers, it doesn't necessarily represent 72% of the 5,000 dairy farmers. It means that of the 1,157 interventions, we had 72% for that category.
In your exchange with Monsieur Breton, you had specifically, when you were talking about the stressors, and you had made reference to the supply management system. So is this coming within the context of the uncertainty that supply managed farmers are facing, given the percentages that are being hived off through the Comprehensive and Economic Trade Agreement, the CPTPP, and now the new agreement with the United States? Do dairy farmers, are they getting stressed because they just feel that the ground is shifting beneath their feet? They get promised one thing, but then what comes is completely different. Is that what the experience is?
Oui.
Yeah.
Oui, puis pour avoir parlé avec...
Yes, indeed. And based on my conversations with a number of producers, they feel abandoned. They say, very nice, we've got this lovely supply management system, which does ensure a certain quality of life. We're able to foresee paying for our expenses. But as I said earlier, we've sent out the message, and a number of dairy producers have invested major investments, and now they're saddled with debts. The future looks very uncertain to them. So yes.
I think it's shameful that our system is having to pay for another jurisdiction's overproduction problems. And I know the exact same for the dairy farmers in my region, all supply managed farmers. The system has allowed them to set a long-term plan to make those investments. And they get told one thing, but then something completely different happens. So I can very much empathize with that. I just want to move on. In our last committee meeting, we had some fascinating testimony from Dr. Jones Bitton, who's from the University of Guelph. She was talking about a bell curve, about the different kinds of stresses. You know, there's a green stress, amber stress, and red stress. And, you know, if you operate too much in the red stress zone, you get feelings of being overwhelmed, lost, you have hopelessness. You know, there's good stress and bad stress. She offered 3 recommendations, but one of them was to support evidence-based training programs for agriculture. In your opinion, what would this entail, and how do you think the federal government specifically is best suited to deliver them, given that we ultimately want to produce recommendations for that? I know, a big question, and you can both take a crack at it.
Well, what I know for sure is that, well, there are organizations in Quebec like Au Cœur des Familles Agricoles, you know, working with the families of agricultural producers over the last 15 or so years. I can see what they've done. Unfortunately, the difference between what they're really experiencing, you know, our farmers, the lifestyle, the amount of work they have that has a negative effect on their psychological state of mind, has never been pinpointed as being different than what people in general experience, the general population rates of psychological distress. So we need a study to ensure that this difference, what sets them apart, is recognized by all. We need to understand that their workplace is their family. Their business, well, you know, your father, your son, that's your partner, and in the evening, they're there at home. These factors contribute to this being the only business that's like this. There are, of course, father-son private enterprises, but they needn't meet up in the evening or live in the same house in the evening. They can't see their business just outside, you know, on the fields that aren't being taken care of the way one of them would like every night, every morning. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Beauregard, Langevin, Desrosiers, Madam, thank you for the work that you're carrying out. I'm not a young agricultural producer, but I have friends who are. And we don't yet have the services we're speaking of today out there in the regions. So hats off to you. I did once, arrive just in time. I'm not sure if the person was truly suicidal, but they were really in distress. And I imagine, Ms. Langevin, that this is the sort of thing that you see on a daily basis among these farmers. Mr. Beauregard, you mentioned the father-daughter, father-son, parent-daughter, parent-son relationship. And I've sat on boards of directors, with families, and I remember we didn't always align. I remember my grandmother once saying, come and eat at home. We'll figure this out around the dinner table. No politics at the dinner table. And that's the way it works. Of course, for farm producers, the whole family is managing the business. How do you manage that? I imagine that there are family squabbles, and that too is a source of stress. Yes, I will allow Ms. Langevin, as a field worker, speak to you. Yes, I've seen many family conflicts. I mentioned one earlier. Well, what we do is ensure that we send someone in who will give the family a chance to speak things out, to talk things through, rather. As a social worker, I often meet each member of the family individually to prepare them, and then we sit around the table and I'm there to assist them. I'm not there to tell them what to do, what conclusions to reach, but rather to give them a better opportunity to express themselves. Many things aren't said when you're out in the field or managing the animals, can be said when you're sitting calmly in the evening around a table. Now, you mentioned, Ms. Langevin, that you have been a dairy producer yourself. And how important is it to ensure that you link people and get people to connect? Well, it's difficult to explain it, in as much as I find it's very easy to establish a contact with these people. I don't have to start discussing agricultural matters to get across that I'm there, and they needn't say that much either. I understand them quickly. They say they've gone to a doctor, fine, a doctor has told them to go home and rest. That's not what I do when I see them, because if I do that, I'll just lose them. I say, rather, in your 90-some hours of work a week, what do you think about taking 2 of those hours just to take care of your mental health, your psychological well-being? And they say, oh, okay, 2 hours out of 99, that's not too bad. Just 15 minutes and I'll already be feeling better. That's what I get across to them. So I'm not going to prescribe take 3 weeks off work, because as Mr. Beauregard said, if you say that, that just makes them more stressed. Wow, who's going to be taking care of my animals? Who's going to take care of the business when I'm away? I'd rather go at it in the milieu, keeping them where they are, saying, okay, what are we going to do this week among all the other things you have to do? If we take 2 hours out, what are we going to do with them to help you? So they go ahead and make their own decisions about this. They decide when they have extra time. We have heard witnesses tell us that asking them to take a month off isn't of much use, because they just have to go back to the farm. If I go home to rest, well, I don't live on the hill here at the Parliament of Canada, so I can unhook from work, but they can't. How do you coach them? How do you coach the people who are called upon to help these producers? Well, when it comes to mental health, agriculture producers don't know that much about what it is. They know what physical health is, but mental health, psychological health, what's that? So we help them understand what they can do, where they are, because as we said earlier, they stay close to their farms, their houses. So we do things like, how about just taking a long walk out really far into your fields to relax? We've had situations, for example, I remember someone saying, what do you think of my getting up on the tractor with you? If you don't have time, why don't we just take out the tractor, you do your work, I'll sit beside you and we'll work on the tractor. And that worked. He needed my help. He needed me there and then. Going back to the stigmatization of mental health and mental health issues, we know that there is a lot of public education underway. But what can we do to reduce the stigma associated with mental health issues? Could the Canadian Mental Health Association do more to help farm producers in this regard? Yes, I think that something has already gotten underway in Quebec, a project to raise the awareness among farmers and other agricultural producers to the effect that it's not a stigma, mental health issues. It's not shameful to go for help, and we discuss wellness and illness prevention in a more positive light. In Canada, health legislation also covers mental health, but it's a provincial and territorial federal jurisdiction, though. It's a shared jurisdiction. So I'd like to know what the federal government could do, what sort of resources we could offer, targeting specifically the agricultural sector. Perhaps Ms. Desrosiers could speak to that. Perhaps we'll give her a chance to add something, given that she hasn't said much so far. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Desrosiers. Well, it would be helpful to set aside budgets to train social workers to help them better understand the issues among farm producers. As Ms. Desrosiers said, it doesn't take that much to really establish yourself as being a credible helper or to really lose their attention. It's helpful to understand how farms work. If you don't understand the work that they're doing, you can very easily not make contact, not make the right contact, lose your credibility, and then these people may refuse to come in, may refuse to consult in future. So we need a larger budget to train more people able to intervene, but who know what they're doing, and people who are aware of what the agricultural milieu is all about. Thank you. Is there anything anyone would like to add? As I was saying earlier, the best way to encourage agricultural producers to go for help is to help them understand that it's not a stigma. It's not a negative thing to ask for help. And perhaps programming could be worked up to encourage them to go for help in the among current healthcare providers, of course, but also provide other types of care available to them. I think that would count. In Quebec, this is the sort of thing that's being discussed a lot over the last 2 years. L'Union des producteurs agricoles has really focused on psychological distress among farmers, ranchers, and other producers. So thanks to this open discussion, the producers themselves are understanding that it's a very positive thing to go for help. At the federal level, it would be very helpful to look over what is being done and what could be done to support this effort to help producers go for help. I see that in Quebec, there's already a move in the right direction. There are a number of regions, though, that we're not covering. Every year, we struggle to get the funding to cover the operating budgets and development budgets of organizations that are working in the regions. At this point, people in the regions are calling us. They feel that they need the funding to support their programming. So what could we do? Could we create a special purse, a special envelope for monies to train people the way the suicide sentinels have been trained in Quebec, working closely with the Quebec Association for Suicide Prevention, and they have stepped up and allowed for training people who are especially trained to work with farmers. Could we do that sort of thing elsewhere across Canada? Another question. We have a 30-year study of farmer suicide across Canada showing that the suicide rate among Quebecers is twice as high as that for the rest of the population. Do you think that that's still the case? We don't have any recent studies because the study I just cited is 30 years old. Well, these are not the kind of figures that we have at our fingertips at this point. So someone who goes for help is usually not yet suicidal. Keep in mind that, yes, unfortunately, many agricultural producers may commit suicide, but speaking for our organization, 95% of the people who come to us for help are not yet suicidal. They are in distress, yes. It's an irreversible act, isn't it, suicide? We need to ensure that people don't get to that point. Most producers, though, are in a state of distress. They're not yet in a state of suicidal ideation, so we need to act preventively. We need to do everything we can to prevent their becoming suicidal. So I think we need a two-pronged approach. We don't want them to commit suicide, but we also want to ensure that we prevent their even reaching that point. Ms. Langelin, what do you think the most important parts of an anti-suicide strategy would be among agricultural producers? Unfortunately, I have to cut you short. We've run out of time.
For being a part of our discussion. Nancy, I want to say to you thank you. I'm wondering what sort of, in terms of the interveners, and Mr. Beauregard, you talked about that also, 1,667 interventions, you have 5 interveners. How did you get trained? What took you to being part of what you call the milk run? And I have a question about that. How did that get started, that you just make cold calls onto farms?
The
milk runs pertain to interventions. The people who are suffering from psychological distress, who have suicidal thoughts, well, it's not often that they sit on various committees. They won't sit on the committee of the UPA, l'Union des producteurs agricoles. They're very isolated. So these milk runs, well, their purpose is to go to those individuals who are the most vulnerable. I don't have a list of farmers. I don't have a list of the farmers along the road. So I stop. Farmers talk amongst each other. So I introduce myself. I knock at the door to see those people that we don't frequently encounter.
For interveners, how does that happen? Who does the training? Who should be doing the training? And what would be the qualifiers to have an intervener trained? Oh, Mr. Beauregard.
Oui. Ben, peut-être la formation, dans le fond.
When we talk about training, it's formal training. So these are individuals who have BAs in social work, or else they studied at the collegial level. So that's their training.
Okay, the professional psychologists and that, you know, they have their role. So you have 2 other components that are really critical. One is because Nancy and those like her come alongside somebody and actually they give them hope. That's one of the key ingredients, I believe, in this. The second part, is there someone that comes along and puts together some financial support, and that being collecting the information of debtors, or creditors, I should say, and then somebody understanding to sit with these individuals to help. I mean, having someone just to talk to that when you get closed in, and you talked about the financial stress, and I would suggest that yesterday is going to be an additional stress added to much of the farming community. Is that somebody to come along and how do we deal with it? Because what happens when I was told back in the 1980s is you can't think straight. You just can't pull it all apart to categorize the issues that you need to prioritize to look at your financial situation. Is there a financial component to it? Assistance?
Vous parlez d'une aide financière.
You're talking about financial assistance for the farmer? Yes. To access the services or financial assistance to have... For what? For what purpose? We offer free services. They're free of charge throughout the province. When the producer comes to meet with us for accompaniment services with interveners like Nancy, same thing with respite and housing assistance, all of those services are provided free of charge. So at that level, it's not a limiting factor in their application for help. Be it a small or a very large business, there are no charges for our services if they come to us for help. With regard to assistance, let's say that the individual is experiencing financial problems on the farm and needs outside help to recover, to get back on track, well, there probably are provincial level programs in support of that kind of need. As strange as it might seem, when they seek out help from us, despite the fact that they're experiencing financial problems, that's not what they'll talk about mostly. It's one factor amongst many. So our interventions aren't simply based on financial issues.
Become an issue in any of the cases that you deal with because of the anxiety?
I can't tell you if there's more substance abuse or not. They don't have to drive to go to work because their work is at home. So if they have alcohol abuse issues, well, they're at home and they can start drinking in the morning, or they can have a shot during the afternoon. They just have to open a bottle. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this exchange. Thank you, Mr. Beauregard, Madame Langevin, and Madame Desrosiers. Thank you for having participated this morning to deal with an issue that is very important for our farmers. So we'll suspend the meeting for a couple of minutes, and we'll come back with the second panel. Thank you very much.
Can we rejoin our seats and we'll get the second hour going? So with us today we have as an individual farmer Mr. Sean Stanford. Thank you for being here, Mr. Stanford. And also from LPG Farms, Megan Reynolds, owner-operator. and Monsieur Stéphane Bissaillon.
And Mr. Stéphane Bissaillon, we're told that he will be arriving a little late. When he arrives, he'll be able to be seated at the table.
Have an opening statement for up to 6 minutes. Thank you.
Sure. So hi everybody, my name is Sean Stanford. I farm, just hold on a second. I'm a 34-year-old grain farmer from southern Alberta. I farm there with my wife and our 2 young children. I'd like to just begin by telling you that I'm not weak or I'm not a lesser of a man, I'm just a little sick. So I suffer from anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. I was diagnosed nearly 2 years ago and have been on multiple medications and seen multiple therapists to help me with my conditions. While I may not be different from many Canadians, the industry that I work in makes these conditions a bit harder to deal with. There are actually many extra challenges that farmers and producers have to deal with that the general population does not. Farming is one of the few occupations that is highly dependent on weather. As you're well aware of, no one can control the weather. I can tell you it is quite stressful knowing that the biggest factor in your paycheck for the year is out of your hands. There are many farmers back home that have not finished harvest yet, and it is covered with snow. After a very, very dry summer and now a wet fall, emotions are running quite high. Farmers also spend many hours and days isolated on their land. I myself have gone days on end without seeing another person for the entire day. This gives your mind too much time to play tricks on itself, time to second guess yourself and think about if you are making the right decisions for your business. And it does not give you an opportunity to think about what's actually happening in the real world back home. You can get lonely out there and miss your family. Isolation also means less access to professional help, such as doctors, counselors, and psychologists. All 3 of these professions are integral to the proper recovery of someone suffering from mental health conditions. There are multiple elements that experts say are required to keep a person healthy. Included in those are proper exercise, nutrition, relaxation time, and sleep. I can personally tell you it is nearly impossible to get all these elements in as a farmer during the busy season. Working 100 hours or more per week is not abnormal. Having a meal that does not come out of a lunchbox is also uncommon. And if you ever tried to do jumping jacks in a tractor, it's not that easy. Now the big questions. What resources are available and what is missing? Rural Canada has been shrinking. Our local hospital and doctor's office closed up many years ago. For any counseling or therapists, I need to travel about 30 miles. I know that it's a lot longer and further for many others. Then to actually get an appointment with some of these professionals, the wait can be many weeks. This is unacceptable. The cost of these services is also quite high. We need better and cheaper access to these health professionals. I had my first interaction with a counselor through my local fire department. I have volunteered there for 14 years, and that's where my PTSD stems from. When I asked my fire chief to find me some help, there was already a set of resources lined up to help me. Emergency services seems to have the proper channels in place already. As far as I know, there are no dedicated resources like these in place for farmers and agricultural producers. Many of the medications used to treat anxiety and depression can be quite expensive as well. Thankfully, I am able to afford Blue Cross coverage for my family, but this does not cover some of the medications required or prescribed. These medications need to be more affordable to everybody. I have learned a lot and made many connections using social media and the internet. Twitter has been a huge help for me to find many resources, links, and friends to help me through the tough times. Proper cellular service in rural Canada is detrimental for this reason. Contact with the outside world when you're isolated is more possible, so the use of smartphones and mobile internet has been a huge help for me. What else are we missing? What else haven't we thought of yet? Special conditions for ag producers may call for special solutions. Maybe a mental health app for smartphones or some kind to help diagnose issues or provide ideas to help out during rough periods. Perhaps teleconferencing or video conferencing with a therapist may help. Trying to stomp out the stigma of having a mental health condition is a huge hurdle to overcome, especially in agriculture. Many people, including myself, felt like mental health issues should be something that individuals should be able to handle themselves. Some producers have tried to beat down these walls of stigma and have faced a barrage of bullying and personal attacks for it, myself included. We need to come up with a way to tell people that they are also sick and need proper treatment, no different than a cold or a cut on your hand. We need to end the stigma. I hope that this has given you some insight into my personal thoughts on mental health issues facing agriculture. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. And now Ms. Reynolds for 6 minutes.
I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and had an 11-year career in the film industry before meeting my husband and moving to rural Saskatchewan. There, I became a grain farmer. It didn't take me long to figure out how challenging, stressful, and isolating farming can be. 2016 may have been my 4th crop year, but it was the first time I stood and watched while my crop, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, was destroyed in a 10-minute hailstorm. It was also the first time in my life that I felt like a complete failure. A failure as a farmer, a failure as a spouse, and a failure as a provider for my family. It was the first time, and sadly not the last, that I felt my only worth to my family was in my life insurance policy. I would love to sit here in front of you all today and say that things are better, to say that I'm the only one in Canadian agriculture who has ever felt this way, but to do so would be a lie. We are now struggling with our 3rd year in a row. Weather extremes that sabotage our ability to grow the bushels we need to make a profit, commodity prices that do not come close to covering our expenses, and transportation issues that inhibit our ability to pay our bills on time. I no longer know what it feels like to live without stress, and my husband now struggles with anxiety triggered by the stress of trying to farm and make ends meet, an anxiety that I have watched bring him sobbing to his knees. If you ask me in this moment if I hope that my girls would grow up wanting to take over our 4th generation farm, I would tell you that I would encourage them to do anything but become farmers. However, the stark reality is that if we continue down this path, there will not be a farm for them to take over one day. Right now, I'm sure you're thinking that we must be bad farmers, that there must be something wrong with our business plan. Because after all, the point of a business is balancing risk while trying to make a profit. Do you know that grain farmers in Canada have the 2nd highest cost of inputs? That means our seed treatment, our fertilizer, and the chemicals we need to grow our crops. We also cannot come close to growing the bushels that other countries grow thanks to our short growing season and dry climate. On an average year, the bushels I am able to produce on my fields do not cover my expenses, including my mortgage and my land rent. I need to work off-farm, not only to put food on my family's table, but to also subsidize my farm expenses. If I worked as a teacher, a nurse, a banker, or if I was still working in the film industry, I would not be required to hold a 2nd job to afford to do my 1st. You see, I cannot raise the price I sell my crops for in order to help cover the rising expenses associated with growing my crops. When I need to move grain to pay bills, I try to find the best contract possible, but ultimately have very little control over the price. I'm usually forced to sell at a time when prices are low from harvest pressure in order to cover bills that have been accumulating over the year. If a carbon tax is forced upon me, I also stand to add an additional $30,000 to my expense list as well. In February, I sat in a room full of 400 producers. We were tasked with standing up when a question asked applied to us. The first question was, have you ever lost a family member or friend to suicide? 90% of the room stood up, and that broke my heart. Farmers, not only in Canada but globally, are struggling. We're struggling with high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. We cannot speak out or admit that we are struggling because we are told to be strong. We're told to suck it up. We're told that we are not real farmers if we ask for help. If we seek treatment, we might be turned down for life insurance policies or watch our premiums skyrocket. Life insurance companies classify us as higher risk when taking care of ourselves and seeking help. We run on 3 to 5 hours of sleep during the busy seasons like seeding and harvest and go for weeks without seeing much of our families and children. We spend 15 hours plus a day in equipment cabs by ourselves. In isolation, we were running the numbers, worrying about our bills and getting further into our own heads. Sometimes we have our children with us as well, where we have to juggle farming because we don't have access to childcare. Often we are also volunteers in our communities as first responders who deal with being on scene for accidents and the deaths of our friends and community members. This summer, a friend posted that a farmer in her community had just died from suicide. I did not know the person, but I broke down sobbing at my kitchen table. When I took a moment to reflect as to why the death of someone I did not know upset me so much, I was forced to bring light to a fear that I do not want to dwell on. The fear that surges up when I cannot get a hold of my husband. The fear that just possibly he has given in to the nonstop stress and anxiety of trying to provide for our family and farm. The conversation is starting to change. Producers are starting to open up, but it is only a start. The stigma surrounding mental health in agriculture is still strong. We need support from each other, we need support from our communities, services from our healthcare systems, and most importantly, we need to be able to afford to farm without having to work off the farm. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk with you today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reynolds, for your testimony. Are you the first one, Mr.? So we'll have a round of questions, and Mr. Dreeshen for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to our guests. I too farm, and right now we have 80% of our crop that is under snow, and so I mean that it's going to cover just a little bit of the basic expenses that we would have to pay for this month, but it won't be there for the rest of the year. I know exactly where you're coming from in so many different ways, and quite frankly, people don't understand, the significance of you have to get on a $300,000 piece of equipment. You're stressed. You're getting 3 or 4 hours sleep a day. So 18-hour days. People just don't seem to recognize what that is like. And we've had studies even going on. Well, look, this is the average income of a farmer. This is the money that they have come in. They don't understand the investment. They don't understand just how significant that is. Mr. Stanford, you had spoken about some of the types of bullying and so on and issues and the frustration that you have from there. What we're going to try to do here is to come up with solutions. So perhaps if you could just expand a little bit on some of those stresses that you see from people that aren't prepared to move forward or don't understand the need to move forward.
There are quite a few different levels to that, I think. Some of the bullying and some of the questions or misunderstanding is from other folks who I either know very little or don't know at all from online. Others are, even some of my family members, they don't understand the stresses and the struggles that I go through. There's been a lot of, I think a lot more producers have issues that they let on about. Even my own grandfather, nobody knew about this until I started speaking up about it, but when he was younger than me, he was in his 20s, he was hospitalized for 3 days with stress, and he never even talked about it to any of his other family members until recently. So I think it's a good thing that we have these conversations and we talk about this, but I think the more we talk about it, the easier it's going to get for everybody to understand. But right now it's still quite a wall that's put up by everybody.
Megan, in what you were speaking of, and again, you came from a different way of life and then into farming. One of the discussions we had earlier today, and a frustration that was presented was that agriculture is being attacked. And it is being attacked by different types of activists, and I won't go through the list because you'd be well aware of what they would be. And what we need to do is to find a way to perhaps start in schools to determine how we can come up with solutions. And I was a former school teacher to support my farming habit. And so that was, and I get school groups writing letters to say, well, we have to save the bees, and so therefore the neonicotinoids, you got to make sure that you get rid of those things. They just don't understand. So how do we get into the communities, into the urban areas, so they'll have some idea of the actual business, and then maybe we can start talking about how it affects the actual producers.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right now we're looking at most Canadians being at least 3 generations removed from the family farm, so there is a huge disconnect there. and I was one of them. We need something that I think is national, because right now there's Egg in the Classroom in Saskatchewan. Alberta tries to do the same program. Nothing's coordinated. What I've really noticed recently is that there is a breakdown within trust from the consumer with the farmer, the companies we buy our products from, and within Health Canada, because the whole glyphosate case happened in the States, and I was joining that conversation. I was sharing, look, Health Canada reviewed it in 2017. People don't trust that. They don't trust the regulatory bodies reviewing these. So we need to find a way to not only do education in the classrooms nationally, because we know that the best way to influence somebody my age or older is through their children or their grandchildren, bringing this information home. So we need to do something national, and I think if we can maybe work with Health Canada to do that, to create something that fits the curriculum so that it's easy for the teacher, it needs to be easy for the teacher, you know that, that we can try to repair the trust on two sides there, with the farmer and also with the government and Health Canada.
I think one of the other issues as well is to get people talking, and I believe that one of the other groups that was earlier today had said, hey, we go out and we have professionals that kind of go around. They said a milk run where they just check on farmers to see just how they're doing. Do you see a way, and this was Quebec-based, and so my thought was a way of maybe branching this out into other areas. Would something like that work in your community that you are in, that if you had professionals that understood agriculture, that they would be able to go to various groups or communities or farms to be able to help?
I think how Sean talked about FaceTiming with a therapist, I know that there are therapists that do that right now. I think maybe that would be more the route to go. One of the problems that is linked to the stigma is that even if we had the services in my little town of 375 people, guaranteed 99% of the people would not utilize them because they don't want their neighbor to know that they're utilizing them. So it needs to be something that would be discreet if that person needs it to be discreet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you, Mr. Dreeshen. And now Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes. Oh, sorry. Mr. Pesci-Salido. Sorry about that. I'm a bit ahead of myself.
That's okay. Mr. Chair, thank you. Guests, thank you for coming out. I'd like to begin by fundamentally disagreeing with you guys. You're not failures. You're not weak. You are perhaps the strongest witnesses I've ever heard at any committee, and I commend for what you're doing. And in order to change the stigma, what you're doing here is just amazing, and my heart goes out and I say thank you for what you're doing. You talked about some of the challenges, and I was intrigued, Mr. Stanford, to talking about the app regarding mental health. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
As far as I know right now, nothing exists like that. There might be that I'm not aware of, but just being able to identify some of the issues or some of the feelings that people are going through might help them, lead them to the right path if they do have some sort of a mental health condition, whether it's a bit of anxiety or some depression or some stress or whatever it is. If there was, say, perhaps a checklist, fill out these boxes, do you feel this, do you feel that? Then at least somebody knows if they're just having a bad day or if there's some deeper problems that they need to actually seek some professional help for.
And you were talking about professional help and how you're dealing with the professional services. And healthcare and the providing of services is at the provincial level. It's more of a community function. Can you give us your thoughts on how you believe we can improve that? Just to elaborate a little bit more, because I think you're bang on. That is one of the things that we need to fix.
So as far as the direct health care goes from, say, doctors and nurses, in my area it's actually fairly good. Besides having to travel a bit of a distance to get to a hospital or a clinic, that's not a huge deal. But it's the other services like a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor. They're the ones that seem to have a huge waiting list, and they seem to be very expensive. I think that's where we need to try to do more work. I don't know if that means training more of these specialists to be even more proactive in that particular area, or if there just needs to be more therapists and counselors altogether. But that's where it seems to be the biggest gap for me, is the actual mental health part of it. But the direct doctors and nurses and things seem to be okay, in my understanding.
One other issue that you talked about, or factor, was isolation. And I can't relate because I'm not a farmer, but in my neck of the woods, I've spoken to quite a few farmers who've identified that issue as well in different areas. Bruce May was involved in cranberries and berries. Steve Easterbrook was involved with chickens and hens and cattle. How can we fix that? How can we be helpful as a society, and in particular the federal government, to get at the issue of isolation?
Oh, that's a pretty intense question.
I think rural internet.
Yeah, internet is a huge help.
Okay.
Like, I've known Megs for quite a while now, and that's actually how we met, was through social media. And we've gotten to be friends through that. So having access to good internet out in the country where you're isolated has been really a huge help. As small of a thing as it may seem, or just a convenience to some people, for us it's almost getting to be a necessity just to keep contact with the outside world.
And do business.
And besides that, I don't know, just the world's a different place now. There used to be, county dances or little halls where there'd be parties every couple of weeks or something like that. That doesn't really happen anymore. There's not nearly as many farmers or people out in the country anymore like there used to be either. So with fewer of us in certain areas, we're more spread out. There must be some other way that we can keep better contact with even each other, because a lot of times they're the only ones that understand ourselves are other producers.
Madam Reynolds, you talked about the cost of inputs, seeds and other things. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I'm not sure why Canada has the second highest in the world. Japan is the only country in front of us, and where I farm in Saskatchewan, we have huge potash mines, so it's a little bit mind-boggling. But that's not something that we get to change. If we want to grow the best crop that we can, the only things in our ability to grow that crop to its full potential are our inputs and the way that we take care of that seed, because like Sean said, we can't control the weather. So what we can control are our inputs, and that costs us a lot. And we need to go in being completely positive that even if we start out in a drought, that it's going to turn around, because if we don't treat that crop as it's growing with the herbicides to kill the weeds so there's no competition, and the fungicides and the insecticides, then we get that weather and suddenly we have a crop. If we haven't taken care of it to that point, we're not going to have a great crop. So we put those inputs in with the hope that we're going to get the weather that we need. Chances are we don't. This year I had 2.5 inches of rain. It was a drought year. It was not a great crop year. So you spend that hoping you'll get it back, and oftentimes you don't. I think with what Sean was saying with internet, we need to think of rural internet basically as the landline. The landline used to be the necessity. We made sure federally that there were landlines everywhere, there's a grant, right, to make sure that was in place. And I think that's now how we have to approach rural internet, not only for connectivity, but also for our business. We need farming as a business.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to echo my colleagues' comments to you both for having the courage to come here before a parliamentary committee that's on television. You did make reference to the fact that there's still a lot of stigma within your community, but trust me, by the very fact that you're being here today and speaking out, I know there are a lot of farmers out there who are saying that's exactly how I feel, and this is how we get the conversation started. There are other professions, notably in the military, in first responders. They very much have a culture where it's man up, just deal with the problem. But they are starting to shift because they have seen the effect on their members, and they cannot be effective in the job that they do. And you know this as a first responder, a volunteer firefighter. I have friends that do the same thing, often first on the scene. I'm from a rural community, first on the scene for a motor vehicle accident, and it could very well be someone that they know in the community. So I just wanted to really start off by thanking you both for coming. There are so many factors that are beyond a farmer's control, but one of the strengths that we have, especially within government, is to try and mitigate things when they happen. So when you look at when you go through a hailstorm and it wipes your crop out like that, when you look at the suite of business risk management programs that are currently on offer, are they adequate? Are they doing the job? What improvements can we make to give farmers a sort of a safety net from which we know they can rebound from? Any comments?
There are some programs, even last year when we had a bit of a drought year and we didn't have a great crop, I still didn't quite qualify to get paid out on crop insurance. And the crop insurance program is something I've paid into for every year. This year it looks like with some of our drought fields I will get paid out on it, but it seems like the levels on where some of these claims can be made is probably too wide, or it needs to be more in favor of the producers than it is of the insurance companies, it seems like to me, because you could still be losing. It doesn't matter how you try to insure your crop, you could still be losing money on all the inputs you put in. Like Meg said, inputs are expensive and you still won't get a crop insurance payout. So you're thinking, why are we paying into this insurance program when we still can't even break even when we have a poor year?
Right.
So I think that needs to be looked at a little closer, in my opinion.
With agri-stability, it doesn't really work for my farm. If you're trying to expand your operation, or if you're new, so we're technically fourth generation, but my husband started the farm up a couple years before I came along. So we're basically operating as a first generation farm with our risk load and our debt load. A lot of what I have as debt, my equipment, my land, that's not factored into expenses in agri-stability. So agri-stability, the way that it's currently set up, does not help as a risk management tool for my business. Crop insurance, I'm not sure if there's a way to do it, but there are private companies now that are coming up. Global Ag Risk is one of them. It's a really interesting business model for insurance that would actually fit my farm better, but the premiums are too expensive because they don't have that subsidy. So I would be interested to see if we could take the subsidy provincially, federally, and apply it to the insurance that we feel is best on our farm.
Thank you. You also mentioned the transportation problems, and earlier this year we did have CN and CP Rail before the committee to explain themselves for the problems that they are experiencing getting our crop to market. I can, from where I'm from Vancouver Island, we can see the problems all the way down the line. We have freighters parked in anchorages everywhere. Port infrastructure is simply not capable of handling what we want to do to export to the Asian market. The railways gave their assurances that they have a plan and that they're working on it, but all of the subsequent witnesses who represented farm groups did not believe them. And now that we're half a year forward, is there anything from your point of view that gives you hope? Anything more that we can do? I know we did pass Bill C-49, but is there light on the horizon in this particular area for you?
I hope so. I've actually been in some conference calls with CN about this, and they do have a plan. They're working really hard. It's going to come down to what our winter's like and seeing how they actually implement that plan. So right now, I think the mood in farmers across Western Canada, especially ones in Saskatchewan that are completely landlocked, is they're going to believe it when they see it.
And the other thing too is we've heard a lot of witnesses say that there's a disconnect between the consumer and the farmer. When people go to a grocery store, they don't automatically make that connection to where their food came from and how it was produced. And I don't think we value farmers enough in our society. What more can we do to change that? Is there a conversation going on with within the Grain Farmers of Canada or the subsidiary provincial organizations about, maybe how we make school children more aware of this, how we value the food producers that put this amazing product on our plates?
I think education is going to be the big one, and finding something that is federal, not just provincially trying to put programs together that may or may not be having a great influence. Something going on in Europe, in the UK, they're doing FaceTime with a farmer in school classrooms, which I think is a really great idea. You build trust with that farmer, you get to communicate, ask them questions. And then it'll be interesting to see too, I know some of the stuff Health Canada wants to do with labeling, creating a sustainability label on food. That will need to be tread very lightly, because how I grow my crops in Saskatchewan with zero-till, I have a lot less moisture than a farmer growing wheat in Manitoba.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I have to move on. Monsieur Drouin, pour 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Stanford and Ms. Reynolds, thanks for sharing your story. I mean, when we talk about stigma, I think the fact that you're sharing your story today is breaking those barriers. And I want to touch on social media, and maybe Mr. Stanford, because you're fourth generation farmer and you were there, you should probably still remember the days when social media was not there. I hope when you were helping your dad or your mom. And how do you feel about the pressures of social media? And Mr. Dreeshen talked about it with, animal activists being online and just the pressures of society when you're farming out back home, you're isolated in some way, but in the same time, you've got the whole world putting this pressure on you. Talk to me about that. Has that impacted you at all, or?
It has. It used to probably bother me a lot more before than it does now, because some people, you're never going to change their mind. Like certain animal activists, they're going to always think farm producers or cattlemen are just the worst people in the world. You'll never change their mind. There's a group of people in the middle who are trying to find their way and try to decide, is it the farmers telling the truth, or is it, say, PETA telling the truth? But all I can do, even on my own social media, I love sharing my story, sharing my farm, showing pictures. I'm doing the best job I can, and I just put my story forward, and hopefully if somebody has a question about it, they can ask, and I'll answer it honestly. I am here, obviously, I have nothing to hide. I'm willing to answer any questions about my farm and how my production goes. As far as I'm concerned, Canada produces the best quality and healthiest food in the world, and I don't see any reason why we should be ashamed or afraid to answer questions about it.
Hear, hear, absolutely. You've mentioned that when you shared your story, you were bullied, and we had a witness last week who sort of said the same thing, but after a while, the community sort of came around. Are you feeling that at all, or? And I'm asking the same thing with Ms. Reynolds. I mean, if you want to answer. Yeah,
definitely. It's a lot different now than it was. Mental health in agriculture is just really kind of starting to turn into a huge thing. It's starting to snowball a bit now. So if I was to talk about this a few years ago, there would have been a lot more pressure on me to, what are you doing or what are you thinking about? But it's really starting to catch on. People are starting to understand that, hey, okay, we actually have some of these issues too. We don't have to beat this guy down because we're actually suffering some of the same problems. We just didn't know about it. Or maybe we can all work together and try to solve these things. I'm not a total crazy person. I just, once in a while, I need some things to help me straighten out. It's not the end of the world. I think people are finally starting to understand that.
And within your community, have you started a sort of a community-based group, or are you're sharing your story with us here today?
I've talked to a lot of people individually at home. There's not necessarily a group, but I'll talk to anybody, whether it's ag producers or some friends of mine from school days or other people in the community. We've talked about it openly, but there's not necessarily a support group.
Mm-hmm. And I know in your opening statement you've mentioned a NAP would be helpful or could be helpful to a segment of the population who feels that they may need to reach out for help. One of the things that we're looking at is how can the federal government help, and I think knowing that most of the provinces deliver services, but from a marketing perspective, do you feel that the Canadian Mental Health Association is doing enough to target producers in terms of saying it's okay to talk about mental health, or are you aware?
I haven't really actually seen a lot from them. The most I've seen or talked about or heard about mental health is through the Do More Ag Foundation in Saskatchewan. Yeah. So they're a great group, and they're kind of almost a middleman between, say, Canadian mental health and the producers, because a lot of farmers or producers don't know exactly where to go for the information. So there could be more of a direct route straight to producers. They just need to know how to channel us and how to talk to us directly.
And I know in big organizations they often develop like a peer system. So just training a few folks in the organizations to identify those who might be impacted by mental health. Do you think that a peer system could be helpful in terms of your community? And again, that Ms. Reynolds mentioned this discretion was extremely important, and I certainly support that. Do you think that would be helpful?
I think that's what Do More Ag is trying to do.
Yeah.
So right now they've partnered with FCC and they're bringing mental health first aid into rural communities. And I think that's a huge step forward, because we can be at a certain place where we're like being able to realize, okay, we need to talk about it. Maybe we need to reach out for help. But there's a lot of times we don't know we're there. And unless you've been trained in mental health first aid, you don't know how to recognize that. So the people that we deal with the most, maybe the input people, the other farmers, when we're in our busy seasons, it's important for those people, our bankers, to know how to identify that I'm struggling and that maybe they need to help me get help. So I think bringing mental first aid into rural communities, if we can, would be really crucial.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds.
Thank you.
Merci, M. Drouin. Maintenant, M. Poisson pour...
To Mr. Poisson for 6 minutes. Thank you very much for being here with us this morning. You know, the information you're sharing with us will be the basis of a study we're producing. We need to know what's actually helping in the field, and you're so well placed to tell us, given that you have actually lived some of these situations. I was a producer, dairy producer, for 40 years, and I saw a number of difficult situations myself. I remember back then we were talking about gatherings, social gatherings of farmers and producers. We used to get together and have fun. We would bring our cows, you know, along the road, a kilometer long. People would say hi and so on. It was a peaceful lifestyle. You could go to church on Sunday. You could hang out at the church doors and chat with your colleagues Sunday afternoon. But much has changed. My concern is that we may have gone beyond a point of no return. So what do you see the future of our agricultural sector as being?
To the point of no return, agriculture definitely has changed. There seems to be there's fewer farms, but they seem to be larger. So there's less individual producers, like you said, where you would meet with a bunch of your farming colleagues on the church steps and have a visit or something. But I think we just need to be able to have better contact with producers in the same scenarios as us. Because there is less of us, we need to maybe look farther to find the same group of people, the same amount of people. That's where, as I was saying, social media and rural internet is a huge help. I know at home there's a large amount of Hutterite colonies who they don't really associate with a lot of individual farmers on a social basis, and they're taking up a large portion of the land. So there is getting to be less and less individual farms at home. So it is changing. I don't think it's unsalvageable. I think we just need to adjust our way of thinking.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for that response. Earlier, you were telling us that you are a worker on a farm. You're in the agricultural sector, but you're still a worker. So your boss must be aware of how you're getting along. Do you have good support from your employers?
So I am my own employer.
Okay.
My wife does keep a pretty good eye on me. She's quite supportive. I farm alongside with my father, so he's been a fairly good help since I've opened up about some of these things with him. He quite doesn't really understand all the details of it either, but it is different when you work for yourself, that you have to make all these decisions by yourself. It is a lot more stress than, say, just being a worker for wages or something like that. So I'm not saying that working for wages is less stressful by any means, but I definitely feel more weight on my shoulders as being the farm owner.
Merci. Vous avez dit...
Thank you very much. Earlier, you were talking about expectations of services. For example, my son broke his hand on at a farm accident, and he had to wait 24 hours in a hospital before he got help. Actually, he didn't wait that long. He had to get back to the farm to deal with his animals before he'd even been seen. So how could we ensure that agricultural producers' expectations be reasonable and reasonably met physically and psychologically as well?
In regards to wait times at hospitals for physical injuries, those are going to vary per location, obviously with population issues. But on the mental health side of it, it could be half a year before I get in to see a therapist or a psychologist. So I think on the mental health side of things, that would be an area to try to improve. And like Sean said, I'm also a volunteer firefighter, and through the volunteer firefighting department, I can get within the week an appointment. So I would love to see something set up for ag that is the same way across Canada.
Merci. Encore un peu de temps?
Thank you. Do I still have time, Chair? Good. So one last question here. You know, we've all been young and then gone into the farming business. Are we always aware of what that's going to be, really? I sort of knew what to expect when I got into farming, but it's not the same as today. So what was the decision-making like to you when you decided, yes, I'm going to be an agricultural producer?
I suppose, but it was an easy decision at the same time because I knew I would not have a super easy life ahead of me. I would be putting in a lot of long hours, but it's really what I wanted to do. So I guess if your heart is in it and if you're passionate about it, then the decision is a lot easier. Trying to deal with some of the struggles along the way, that's kind of the challenging point. But I wouldn't like to change what I do for anything in the world. I love being my own boss and taking care of the land and producing a crop. There's nothing quite like it.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. Alors, merci, Monsieur Poisson. Now, Mr. Motts and Shipley, I think. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for the courage you demonstrated today in being here and sharing your stories and speaking on behalf of a sector that isn't always well understood and the struggles that go on in that sector. So thank you for that. Now, growing up in the country, we know that people rely on each other. That's the only resource you really have. So when you look at when you look at that community structure, does that community structure, one that relies on helping each other, actually help when dealing with mental health struggles?
It definitely helps, but like I said, there's not quite the structure like there used to be. I can't even remember the last time I was at a community dance where they used to happen quite often, or I can't remember the last time I got together with just some of the locals and just sit around and have a coffee or have a beer or whatever. It's times have changed. It seems like instead of farmers wanting to be maybe so friendly to each other all the time, it's almost more of a competition, it seems like nowadays.
So it limits the ability to actually share some of the struggles you're going through personally.
It does. Yeah, I would say that's a fair point. It does limit it. Especially when, like I said, land competition to buy farmland at home is so huge that sometimes you get put off by one of your neighbors, or maybe you're upset with him about something. So it is a little tougher to have a tight-knit community like that right now, I would say.
I think their education comes into that as well because, if someone breaks a hip, it's really easy to say, okay, well, we're going to get a meal train set up. We're going to make sure that there's food going to their house, that we're doing what we can. Maybe they can't run the tractor. We're going to help them harvest. When it's a mental health issue, people don't know how to deal with that. People don't know how to help. They're scared of overstepping. They're scared of making somebody feel weak or like they can't handle things. And I think it just involves education because, there are times if you're having a complete breakdown that person showing up to help you harvest or to bring you supper would be great. But I think with mental health and the stigma around it, we don't want to go there. We don't want to impose. We don't want to. We just don't know how to do it or how to help.
Thank you for those responses. Unfortunately, I've seen in my career a lot of individuals struggling with mental health challenges. Some of them end up in the justice system. Some of them, unfortunately, take their own life. And the impact that it has on community is devastating. We know that. So, based on your experiences, what actions or recommendations would you have this committee be aware of in our communities as local leaders? Should we be sharing more resources, bringing people together? How do we do that effectively in a farming community? Like, how does it work? You've shared some of the challenges. What suggestions do you have to make it better?
I think bringing in mental health first aid so people know. I mean, a lot of people don't even know that mental health is something that we deal with every day, and that's, you know, a moving scale, right? So there just needs to be so much education around it, and then perhaps having an app, having a way for us to be able to, I'm stuck in my combine, it's harvest time, but I need to be able to reach out to somebody. I've got my phone. If there's an app, there's a therapist on the other end, I could do that.
Okay.
That would be a way to really get inside our offices, so to speak, when we need it.
Thank you for those comments. I just have one very quick question, and I'll pass it off to Mr. Shipley. But sometimes there's a disconnect between decisions governments make and the impact it has on the people that they're making those decisions about. Last summer, there was tax implications announced by the current government. From your own experiences, and it had a huge impact on farming and farming operations. From what you heard in your communities, what you experienced from that, can you explain the impact that had on you guys personally and what you heard in your communities?
Well, definitely the cost of production went up. Fertilizer, fuel, a lot of products that we need to use turned more expensive, definitely. And in return, we did not get any more profit for our product that we produced. So all it did with the new taxes was just take more money out of our profits, out of our bottom line. So we had to try to figure out where to tighten up, to try to either make the same money or try not to just to go broke. It was really tough. It's hard. It's an ongoing struggle. There's also new taxes in Alberta as well, and it just seems to be getting harder and harder every day. But we just have to find other ways. If we can't change the taxes or if we can't get rid of the taxes, we have to figure out a way to still be cost effective and make some money.
The succession piece of agriculture, a lot of farms in Canada, 90% are family run and operated. So there's this succession piece of how do we get that onto the next generation. $1 million capital gains exemption is nothing. If you're looking at the cost of land, that is nothing. And for us, it's not a transfer of wealth to be taking over a family farm. It's a transfer of debt. Right. It's a transfer of debt we'll work our whole lives to pay off. So
thank you.
Megan, in your opening statement, you talked about you're at a gathering of some 400, and there were a high percentage, some 90% that you said that had known someone or that had come to suicide. So that's a large gathering of people. Mm-hmm. Was there, and I don't know what it was, the session, but is there something that would come out of that would help us in terms of their advice or their direction of that number of people? And if there is, could you
Unfortunately,
get it to
Mr. Shipley, we will not have time to get that. So, Monsieur Breton pour 6 minutes.
Breton for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I would like to ensure that our panelists are hearing the interpretation because I will be speaking to you in French. You're hearing me? Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here with us today. We truly appreciate this, and it's very helpful for us to have you visiting, seeing as you're out in the field in all senses of the word, and you're helping us understand what the best recommendations will be to be able to help you into the future. We know that an agricultural producer's work is often a lonely work. You often work alone. Of course, you have your families around you and friends, but it's not always that easy to get support from your colleagues, from your bosses, given that you're your own bosses. I'm not sure if you were here earlier when we heard from our first panel members. We heard from an organization in Quebec that carries out prevention programs. They have what they call psychologists or other mental health specialists who travel around and visit farmers. They drop in and visit them to explain what resources are available to them, how they could help. Because, of course, when you're a producer, you don't always have enough time to figure all this out, to say who would we go to see if we needed to, and so on. So these are professionals who carry out home visits, who offer their support, who make themselves known to you. Do you have that type of organization or service available to you? And what do you think of that sort of approach?
Thing like that in place that I know of. I think that could be a great resource, even just to bring everyone to a community hall so that they know what is available, what's out there, and where the next steps would be. Maybe it's not that they need to tell everyone that they're talking to someone, but just to learn more of the information, because you're right, there's a lot of people that don't know what is out there.
There is nothing like that where I live in Alberta either that I'm aware of. I'm sure I would have heard of it by now if there was, but I think it is a good idea. I don't know how spread out the land bases of farmers and producers in Quebec, but I know Alberta is a fairly large area, so it would be a bit of a logistical challenge to be able to drive around and visit so many farms, but I like the idea.
Combien de temps me reste, Monsieur le Président?
How much time do I have, Chair? You have 1 minute, sir. Thank you. And again, I'm so happy that you're here, and your testimony has been very helpful to us. We can see that you're passionate about this, that this is something you're really aware of, and please continue excellent work. Thank you. Mr. Breton.
Being here with us today, it's very valuable what you were able to share. As a farmer myself, I've been to a lot of those. We keep referring to that bell curve, and I've been on both sides, and I certainly appreciate it, and I know it will certainly help us in trying to find a way to serve our agriculture population better. Alors, merci tout le monde. This is all the time.
Thanks to all.
See you at the next meeting.